Добро пожаловать
Good afternoon,
на мероприятие
dear friends.
Days Face.
Welcome to the Positive Hack Days Fest.
Пришла моя очередь
It's now my turn
поднять животрепещущий вопрос.
to talk about a very important
Наверное, с чего хочется
topic.
начать? Давайте я, наверное, начну.
What should I start with? Okay, let me do a short
Присутствует в зале. Есть
interactive
кто-то
part.
представитель от бизнеса. Вдруг кого-то занесло?
Do we have anyone from the business here? By show of hands.
Тогда всех остальных я
Okay.
считаю коллег по
I see
кибербезу. Соответственно, это очень
no hands raised, so I assume that everyone in this room then is my colleagues from this cybersecurity,
Знаете, говорят, время
which
деньги.
is
Сказать вообще
good for me to know. Well, they say that time is money.
Времени мало, поэтому я
There's a lot to say. I don't have that much time, so I'll start anyway. Software supply chain attack, an unacceptable event that we missed, is the title of my presentation. And there is no and or this, etc. There are no words like this. Why is that? I want you to make your own conclusions from my presentation. Let me start by saying up front that my presentation is not technical. I won't speak of the technical approaches to protecting against software supply chain attack. The purpose of my presentation is to give you a broad picture.
Итак, поехали. Для начала пару слов о себе, но
Okay, a few
саморекламы. Меня
words
зовут
about
Александр Кравченко.
myself, but no self-advertising. I'm Alexander Kravchenko. I'm a manager at
В
Solar.
качестве что-то указать на слайде, поэтому
I was asked to put something on the slide,
вот такую фразу.
so I thought that I would use this phrase.
Когда атаки происходят непрерывно,
In a world
что нас
when
атакуют либо сейчас,
attacks happen all the time, and we know that we are either being breached just now or we have been breached and we just don't know it. So living in such a world, ensuring
задача экспертов по кибернетике.
resilience of cybersecurity is a common task of the community of experts.
Тезис моей
The overall premise of my presentation is that a chain is as strong as its weakest link. And indeed, we can build infrastructure in cybersecurity and use various defense methods, but a contractor may fail and the system collapses. As I was preparing for this talk, I had these ideas running through my mind. There are some things that we stare at, but we don't see. Another thing, we do something. Is it because that's the right thing to do, or is it because everyone else is doing? So these are the thoughts that were going through my mind as I was preparing for this talk. Okay, so first, let's make sure that we are on the same page, to be able that we all speak the same language. Let's discuss the basics. Let's first answer two questions. First is who. Okay, who? Who are these actors? Who are these people who are trying to do damage to our organization? Who are we protecting against? Who are those people against whom we do so many things? We have to do so many things. Okay, so who's behind, who's under the hood? And so the first actor would be, of course, the hacker, the threat actor, an APT. There might be multiple labels. And I deliberately do not distinguish between an APT, a group that may represent the interests of a government, or it may be a financially motivated APT, or it may be a hacktivist. If you find that interesting and it is important for you, you can read reports such as Solar's or Positive Technologies or Buy Zones. They
животных, да, если вы понимаете, о чем я.
write quite accessible
О ком пойдет
reports.
речь? Кого нам нужно держать в нашем фокусе? Это, конечно же, сотрудник.
And next, we've got to think about an employee.
Наша организация.
It could be our employee, it could be an employee of a contractor. That is the person who we trust by default. That is the individual with whom we interact. They are in the perimeter of our organization, that they have a certain contractual relationship with us. We may remember here that there is the insider threat.
Делаем акцент на
Anyway, we make our focus on those two groups, the hacker,
Отлично, определились.
the threat actor, and the internal employee. Okay, so these are who we've got to protect against, who we want to focus on. Let us now answer the following question. How
Даже хакеров можно какой пример привести? Вот представьте, вы
they interact. I'll give you
незнакомую компанию.
an example. You walk in a street at night and
Исходит какая-то
you
угроза,
see
вы
a group of people quite far away. You can feel some threats emanating from them. By experience, you know that, or maybe you have heard previously that in your community, in your neighborhood, there have been some incidents related to this group of individuals. And what do? You can take steps, such as, for example, very trivial ones, such as crossing the street and walk on the other side of the street. So this is your response to a threat that you are aware of. And an employee, for example, could be seen as your neighbor.
Возможно, дружелюбен, он хочет оказать вам помощь.
He may be friendly, he may be willing to help you, but for some reason,
Потому что он у вас сосед, вы его видите.
well, you trust that person because they are your neighbor. But there is a reason why you don't want to let them inside your apartment. So imagine that
Тоже выходит на улицу. Представьте, что
that group of individuals and your neighbor is also there. They talk to each other, they have a channel of communication, and they discuss the things that are happening in the neighborhood, they discuss the cars, and interestingly, they discuss you. They discuss how you go to work, and your neighbor may say that you failed to clear up the mess after you, and he says that he doesn't like you, whereas you thought that he was friendly to you. And interestingly, they note that you use delivery services quite often, food delivery or some e-commerce delivery.
В общем, вот эти субъекты,
So these individuals,
внимание, в каком периметре, на ваше поле деятельности.
they
Вот то же самое можно сказать про
have
злоумышленников.
an interest in what you do. And the same applies to threat actors. They talk to each other, they compete, they challenge each other who hacked whom, which methods they used, they sell access.
И самое интересное, это очень похоже, ну это буквально коллеги, вот, например, в исследовании
And
Technologies определили это вот как marketplace.
the Positive Technologies report describes this as a marketplace that you can use.
Соответственно, это очень на это похоже. Так вот, мы
If you're willing to use such services. So these are individuals that can talk, that can discuss your company, and we assume that given the nature of their activity, that it isn't likely that it's going to end in something good. Okay, so we have answered the question who. Let's now answer the question what. What is the supply chain attack?
Коллеги, есть такой термин, как trusted relationship.
First, there is this term, trusted relationship.
Доверительные отношения по отношению к вашим поставщикам. Так вот, это не равно атаке на цепочку
So
поставок.
this is not equal to a supply chain attack, and it's not equal to a supply chain. Why? Because you can often come across in the media that there has been an attack, that an attack abused the trusted relationship. method, but the more you come to know about it, the focus shifts from trusted relationship to certain specific features of the software, of solutions, etc. And importantly, when we talk to the business also reads the media. So when you discuss, it's important to have a context, and within that context you can explain what methods can be used and what actions can you take. The overall picture may look like this. Trusted relationship to suppliers is the big picture. You interact with some third party, you build a relationship of trust with them, you have a contract, you have an SLA, you have some rules. And you may have many contractors. You may have a contract for cleaning services. So this doesn't equal that there is no software involved in that particular service, most likely. And another aspect of trusted relationship is supply chain security. That covers the software that you use in your organization and what you sell to your customers. So all software is covered, and within that supply chain security, there's the supply chain attack, a yet smaller subset. Why? Because even from the point of view of the business, you don't want to treat everything alike. You develop a strategy for a particular area of interest in which your company operates and in which your cybersecurity matters. And likewise here, trusted relationship is one thing, supply chain security is another thing, software supply chain attack is yet another thing. And it's important to understand the differences. Again, the context is important. Okay, moving on to discuss attacks. I have these hijacking updates, I have undermining code signing, compromise open source code. Very interesting, but not always understandable. I don't want to ask if you understand this. Maybe you want to use a translator or interpreter to understand what's going on in supply chain attacks. So again, we've got to reach an alignment, we've got to be on the same page, we've got to have the same language. So who is it that you want to align with? Who do you communicate to? Do you discuss this inside your cybersecurity department to counter those attacks? Okay, that's acceptable. But if you take it outside of that, if you talk to your supplier, if you discuss contractual obligations, if you come to your leadership and you tell them,
Иван Иванович, есть вот такая вот проблема. Мне кажется, вот этот язык будет не совсем...
I think that this language will not be acceptable. He would ask you, okay, what are those attacks you're talking about?
Действительно, проще не значит хуже.
One other thing I want to mention is simpler doesn't mean worse. So please tailor your message to the audience. Tailor your language to the audience, and you can talk about compromised means of software building. And that could be code compromise. At least you will be able to achieve some understanding. There may be misunderstanding still, and you can switch to yet another language, which is the language of the business, and you might try to understand in what context, what language your executives use, and not related to cybersecurity, but say in economics or in legal. And we understand that in many cases cybersecurity incidents are related to operational risks. So how do we find a point of contact? We want to talk in terms that are understandable for the business, such as theft of funds from the business, from the organization's accounts. Will the business understand that? I think they will.
технологического процесса.
or
То есть технологический процесс,
a disruption to
вставлять название из
a
вашей
business
отрасли, и
process.
вас тоже как бы поймут.
Again, very accessible. You tell your manager, okay, say a certain piece of equipment is down. A certain piece of equipment is down, the logistics is not working,
Логистика не осуществляется, и дальше, и дальше. Я тоже думаю, это поймут.
and the list goes on. And I think you will be understood.
Данных, либо потеря данных,
Thirdly,
специальной информации.
that's a leak of confidential information or a loss of confidential information, and not just personal information,
Чувствительная информация, потому что
any sensitive information.
мы работаем в разных компаниях, да, у нас есть госзаказы,
We work in different companies. We have
соответственно,
government order,
ноу-хау, и это данные.
we have some know-how, we have some proprietary information, we have information on contracts, we have information on VIP customers, and this information is what the business doesn't want to lose.
И не приведет, ну, в зависимости от того,
Clearly,
не приведет к остановке деятельности организации, но тем не менее,
the loss of that most likely would not lead to a disruption of the business, but still, there might be some unacceptable consequences or some bad consequences that may turn to unacceptable. When one VIP customer leaves you, that's okay. But if 10% VIP customers leave you, that amounts to 80% of your sales, then there's something to think about.
давайте немножечко подведем итог. Мы ответили.
Okay, let's summarize what we've discussed so far. We've discussed who, we've discussed the what.
Попробовали синхронизировать.
We try to reach an alignment to
Добавим немножечко.
make sure that we are one on the same page. So let's now talk about retrospective, some background.
контексте, в каком мире мы действуем.
What is the context? What is the world in which we operate?
Первое, что хочется отметить, это разрозненные сообщения, которые мы получаем
First is the
новостей. Смотрите, берем
diverse messages that we get from the media. And I've taken, you can see, a 3 years history from 2022 to 2024. There have been reports in 2022 about breaches in Kaseya, in Okhta.
Формат слайда не позволяет.
There was quite a lot of coverage on that, and the slide is too short for me to elaborate on that.
В 2023 году появлялись сообщения о том, что взломали.
In 2023, there were messages of breaches in Movit,
Они могут быть
and those desperate messages
достаточно громкими.
may in fact be
Они могут наделать
quite noisy.
в целом, не только даже в мире кибербеза, а вот
Those media reports may be quite noisy, and not just in cybersecurity, but they can generate some noise about the activity of a particular company. But sadly, you cannot infer from such media reports of what has been going on. And we can feel sorry for those companies, but then we go and continue to do our business. In 2024, there have also been media reports about attacks, about breaches of repositories,
компонентов, которые участвуют в сборке программного обеспечения.
containing components of software builds. 2024, according to some experts, was called the year of supply chain attacks. So disparate messages have been there and will be there. And we can use them to get some understanding, but we won't be able to create an overall picture. The reality, what I want to convey, is that the reality is much grimmer than we can imagine. If you never thought about supply chain attacks, I have bad news for you. According to Verizon, in the data breach incident report, they say that compared to 2023, the number of supply chain attacks has increased by 68%, and they gather quite a large database of information in their product that is called Veris. And they share this information voluntarily. There's no regulation standing behind their shoulder asking to provide information. Imagine 700 organizations share information, and they say that there has been 68% more attacks, specifically in the supply chain management. Yes, there's phishing, yes, there's data leak, and there are some other types of attack, but this supply chain attack has not been in the top list in 2023, but they note that in 2024 there has been a substantial increase, and this type of attacks may be among the top.
156% увеличилось количество.
Another report is that by 156% the number of compromised packets has increased. I was asked, Alexander, why don't you show the absolute number of packets? Well, it exceeds 700,000. And I'm not giving you this number because our brain doesn't operate such numbers. They are hard to imagine. If we come to our management and we tell them, okay, 700,000 compromised packets, and they would ask you, so what? Indeed, so what? That matters for technical experts. But the important thing is that the components that are used in building software, that one matters for the business. That's very understandable. Say, when we cook a scramble, we use some ingredients, and if one of them is rotten, that would influence the overall meal. One other thing I want to share with you as part of the overall picture. Colleagues from Red Security report that suppliers do not rush to report that they have been breached. A company that investigates breaches highlights that in their report. Gartner reports that up to 45% of companies globally may come across supply chain attacks by the end of 2025, because 90% of software contains open source code. And I understand why, because it's easier. But I am afraid I digressed. Let's go back. This is a supply chain attack, a typology from Microsoft. Well, we keep saying supply chain attacks, they are very diverse, similar to phishing being diverse, similar to other attempts to get access to your infrastructure by threat actors. Microsoft, back in 2018, said that they came across an unusual case at that point in time. Supply chain attack in the supply chain. There's a contractor who sold software to edit PDF files. The builds that they sent to the contractor, they had their own contractor that provided a particular packet, and they used it in the final product. So it turned out during the investigation that the infrastructure of the target supplier who sells the software was not affected. Only the infrastructure of the supplier of your supplier was affected, and then it went all the way to the end user. Next. Watchtower Labs. Discuss a situation. Without going back into too much technical detail, just to discuss what's important, because you can discuss it with the business. Okay.
Здесь были использованы контейнерные объектные хранилища у Amazon S3. И
Amazon S3
такой ситуации зачастую
container storages were used, and
был резонансный случай. Мы обращались к какому-то
remember, many of us talked to a government authority
скачайте какой-то, например,
or use the services of a government authority, and on the website it says that there's a link, you can follow it and download a PDF file, or you can use this link to download a software update.
Так вот, что обнаружили коллеги? Что ссылка на это объектное хранилище давно и никто не
What the colleagues found was that the link hasn't been used for a while, and this object became open source, and they registered that in their name just to see what happens. And they found that there was quite a lot of clicks on that official resource, which is no longer official. It used to be owned by a US government agency, but they don't anymore. So what they found is that if you put a compromised repository in that resource that others would download, you may very easily get into the infrastructure. And they put a price there, $120. So for $120, people could get access to your infrastructure. They first notified CISA, that's government authority, and then they published it. The next example.
У нас массовое распространение, не то чтобы истерия, но почему-то теперь мы считаем, что это должно быть в каждой организации. Так вот, коллеги обнаружили с тем, что был скомпрометирован, это относилось к инструментарию, который помогал писать непосредственно код.
The tools that were used to write code were compromised.
Курсор.
GitHub Copilot and Cursor.
Правила написания кода.
The threat actors compromised the rules of writing the code. So AI
Скомпрометированные элементы, позволяющие
included in the code compromised elements that help the threat actors to get access to the infrastructure. This is what
отсутствие акцента или держать в фокусе
lack of focus
несет в себе атака на цепочку поставок с тем, что
on the supply chain attack may lead to.
Добавили фактуру, как-то стало грустно.
Okay, so now we added some facts, and it's quite sad. It has become quite sad, and still, let us try and
Смотрите, коллеги.
answer the question, why
Здесь важно отметить то,
this
что
happens.
в разных ресурсах, вот указывается, например, классическая атака на цепочку поставок.
Well, here we describe the classic attack on components that are used to build software and deliver it to the user. In my view, that is only part of the picture, because in reality, the supply chain includes a variety of elements that we overlook. If we talk about an organization, we've got to decompose, because in an organization there's the top person that makes the decisions, and there's the information security person who is supposed to be responsible for the cybersecurity. There's the IT person, including developers, that are also part of the process. We have regulators. We have standalone developers that might maintain the component that is critical to your software. There are developer communities. And there are classic integrator vendors, and each of them has a separate role to play. Then we've got to keep focus on the processes. And here I only mention the processes of development and support, but I omit the process of delivery. But I think I also want to mention here the processes of ensuring cybersecurity. Why? Because the classic is to monitor the information events, but this also relates to this type of attack. So the classic frameworks should also be leveraged. Next, the components that I talked about, the code, the libraries, the repositories, the dependencies,
и, конечно, метрики. Вот здесь
and of course metrics.
Это договорные обязательства, это
And one thing to note here is contracts and the regulatory requirements, compliance requirements, and time to market. Why this is important? Let's look at time to market. The business says, look, we need it. I've got a brilliant idea. Let's make it, let's sell it. The developer says, I don't know how to do it. The business says, okay, can you do it real quick? And you know, there's this MVP, let's try to come up with something. The developer says, no, I won't be able to develop it from scratch tomorrow, but I have a nice open source component, I will tweak it, and it should work. So you can see that from a business request, there's a link to an open source component.
Okay, the SLA, we need it as soon as possible. Then who is responsible for incidents? This is important because when we deal with a contractor, when we talk about the supply chain security, who'll be responsible finally? How well is it described by your papers and in your agreements? To which extent is your contract compliant in terms of the regulators' requirements? And if we talk about the supply chain compromise, whom are we going to ask questions there? So just imagine how sophisticated it is, how many elements we have at play there. Now let's talk about the motivation of this attackers. Okay, they need money. Everybody needs money. But this, this is some kind of understanding, but it is not complete. Why so? The better we know the enemy, the better we understand how to counteract them, which strategy to pick. There are two elements here. So we are not starting with business here. We talk about the business reasons and technical reasons. So financial benefit, money, less of awareness. Okay, do we know about these types of attacks? So do you know how to counteract this? What do we do? And whether cybersecurity is something we know at all. Okay, let's talk about the global spread of software. Okay, irrespective of where it is developed, it spreads throughout the world, and we become the source. I mean, we can develop things, and we also generate demand for software. Okay, the spread of open source components, that's one thing I mentioned, and also the information on the cybersecurity measures taken in the company. Why is it important? Okay, colleagues, we've been speaking here, and there are some other colleagues from the Polish Technologies company. They generate their own conferences, and they say outright, we do things for cybersecurity. They say it openly. Okay, the wrongdoers, they have some information. Well, I'm not calling on everyone so that you say that okay, I'm doing this, I'm brave, and so on. Okay, the information on the measures you are taking for cybersecurity, it should not be concealed. I mean, we refer here to the policy of information security, which every company should have. Okay, so why do we make it open for third parties? We do it so that everybody could have a look and see whether a given company is doing something. So maybe you cannot just attack it straightforwardly. Okay, there are some technical reasons. You kind of are already hacked, but you just don't know about it, and so it came from an unexpected source. And sometimes it's quite difficult to understand who the threat actors are. Like the researchers say that it's not always possible to understand understand who the beneficiary is of this process. The scale of compromise. So you compromise one supplier, and through this you compromise a lot of companies, and you get access to 100 companies. You can use it yourself. You can sell this access rights to somebody else. The cybersecurity systems are vulnerable. This is obvious. So the software is vulnerable, and we have vulnerabilities in the overall cybersecurity system, because sometimes the process is not streamlined. Sometimes the monitoring response processes are not good. So we're talking not about specific systems, or individual systems, but the overall cybersecurity system. And another important thing is the window in the submarine. It means that you build a good structure, but it still tumbles down because a developer might use a compromised component, and this is enough to make things look bad. Okay, let's proceed. Let's talk about my research to identify and to determine these unacceptable events, as we call them, UEs. I had more than 150 respondents taking part in my survey from 13 industries. Here you see the list of these industries. So we also mention others. Here, well, I mean some industries where we have few kind of responders. But this is still important, I think, to mention. The most important thing to mention. Okay, we have 150 respondents, and only 16 or 10% of them said that they do directly consider the attack on the supply chain as an unacceptable event, the UE. So this is something they know about at least. So they can take measures at different levels, at the reflexes level, at some steps, and so on. So they can take steps to kind of protect themselves from this type of attacks. Just imagine you have a flat, and you know that you might have fire. You might be flooded, so you have some electricity-related issues and so on. Well, you know, your flat might burn down if some play with fire, or you might have a short-circuit event and so on. So you focus on this threat of fire. So you take some steps, so you just don't set fire to everything around your flat. So you switch off your electric devices and you look at their condition from time to time. And then we go through some automated conscious decisions and so on. But if you don't focus on this, how can you protect from this? Okay. And then we might read some individual reports which might kind of bring together an overall picture I can share with people here. Okay. One more thing to focus on.
Почему я указал, в принципе, в названии недопустимые
So I mentioned here unacceptable events. Okay, so we have this UEs. We don't want some funds to be stolen. We don't want an important process, an important technological process to stop. We don't want information to be leaked or destroyed. And we know the system to protect, but we don't understand what to protect it from, how this attack might be implemented. So we try to protect them from spear phishing. So we try to protect from brute forcing our passwords by making policies for this. But the success kind of story is based on what we understand, what we should prevent, what we should protect. But we should also understand what we are protecting it from. We should understand what the threat actors are going to do, and we should build a strategy to counteract this kind of activities. Let me share with you an example. Just an example of a UE. This comes from a Russian IT company. The contractor was compromised, and the goal, as was determined by the F6 company, so the goal was an oil and gas company. this is quite important. The attack was not implemented. Okay, so why are we talking about it? Well, but you know, well, by some calculations, we saw that if this attack had been implemented, then 65 million rubles would have been lost due to the downtime. So I think this is important. Yeah? This is a big bag of cash. Apart from this direct damage, they would have had to spend 25 more million rubles to get back to their normal business. Well, Solar Rings attack. Another example. Well, in 2020, when the IT supplier was hacked, they got access to about 18,000 organizations in the States, and this really highlighted the supply chain attacks in the whole world of cybersecurity. Okay, what is important? Their shareholder value decreased by 20%, which is unacceptable, I think. But the most important thing is that they had to spend $75 million as their cybersecurity investment. Well, just imagine, you have a plan, you have a strategy, you fight for budgets, and it's not that easy. I think you would agree with me. I've never heard of someone who would easily get big paychecks easily. Okay, so you have a strategy, but here is an incident. Some unacceptable event happens. So you should bring back the trust of your partners and your customers. So how are you going to do it? You will kind of promise it to them that this is not going to happen ever again. And for this, you should take specific measures to prevent this. So this is not just on paper. This is not just being in line with the regulator's requirements. You should provide something more kind of tangible. For instance, you, as a contractor, you could implement the bug bounty campaign. You can say, colleagues, please improve our cyber stability so that we prevent cases like that in the future. So these two examples might be merged together for us to understand why we are talking about this. Now let's briefly talk about the role of the government and international cooperation in this field. When I was dealing with this issue, I thought, okay, what is the role of the regulator? Because many built their strategy and their measures in terms of cyber security based on the regulator's requirements. And this is fine, but a regulator is a machine which doesn't always work timely. It implements the principle of minimal requirements. So these are the minimal things which should be done. And the most important thing is that the regulator's requirements are sometimes mandatory, sometimes they're just recommendations. And this mandatory or recommended, well, is something people start kind of interpreting in their own ways. Say, in the States, they have different regulators. This includes the European Union Cybersecurity Strategy. This is used for the digital product requirements. Like they set the requirements at the stage of the development of any technological product which has some digital components like software. So they set the requirements for cybersecurity at this stage. So they build their foundation at this stage. So we have the CISA, the NIST standard, and here we have the RTCA DO 178B. This is a standard for the aviation industry for software. Again, I think you would agree with me that in aviation they cannot talk about recommended or mandatory measures. Any software which is related to aircraft, its control, and so is critical. There, well, you cannot kind of relax, right? You cannot do the bare minimum. and just forget about it. No. This is really tightly controlled, and these regulations, they are really in force. When I started preparing for this speech, I wanted to see what we have in Russia in terms of secure development. And I was, frankly, I was surprised that we have 2 slides about it. So we have even more than that. Well, as a matter of fact, we have a framework to rely on. We have requirements we can rely on. But we run into this classical issue. Okay, the organization, okay, is related to this or that, so they can do it. No. We have our national standards for developing secure software. So are we using this national software? Are we using it everywhere? Is, I don't know, every second company using it? Okay, this is an open-ended question. Let's talk about the international community. Well, sometimes you might imagine that you are one in this field. Like, okay, I'm there in this supply chain attack situation, what shall I do? Well, you are never alone. We have colleagues in the industry, we have developers. They understand all the importance and all the risks and threats related to developing software and supply chain attacks and so on. So this experience is consolidated and it's implemented in the standards we use and trust, like the ISO. We also use the OWASP, so they also pay a lot of attention to this. We have the cyberattack, which is a Russian community focused on the process of secure software development and supporting the security of web applications in general. We also have the SLSA community. So I think we have the Checkpoint, Microsoft guys, and some other experts who understand that this process should be given some attention, and we should have some specific, clear requirements. So if from the technical side you want to see how it should be implemented, you should have something to begin with. And so on.
Немножечко подведу такой итог. Мы с вами определили,
Summing up.
кто пытается нас
Okay, we have determined who's trying to hack us, what they're trying to kind of impact. We understand our context. We understand the complexity of the multifaceted nature of these attacks, many participants, many processes, many metrics we face daily. So we understand that these attacks come in different shapes and forms. We understand that we have regulators there to support us and to develop the legal framework further, and we thank them for this. So I think it's time
немножечко заняться неблагодарным делом, именно прогнозы.
Talk about forecasts. So we understand people don't like forecasts, especially the weather forecasts. This is a joke, but I will try to come up with my version of a forecast. So this is the only meme. Software is all around us. I was asked this question. So how the growth of the software market is related to the growth in the number of attacks against the supply chain? Okay, the more software we sell, the more we use it, and software will be everywhere. And threat actors and hackers and attackers, they also live in this world, they also use software. They understand the more software, it's different, it comes in different shapes and forms, it's becoming more and more sophisticated ways, it has more and more dependencies. This is a great field for investigation. So the market is going to grow to 2224. Okay, 2,234 even. Yeah, 34. So they say that they will grow annually about 11%. So this is the growth of the market.
Далее. Рост включения в процессор.
Okay, we see that like Satya Nadella, the head of Microsoft, openly recognized that AI is writing the code for the Windows operating system, and this is a well kind of spread operating system, and we should remember the example
выводим из эту формулу, что мы используем
So we use
систему, которая
an operating system which is written by AI, which can also be attacked. And this, well, is not really nice, is it? But anyway, we see where we should work, where we should focus in terms of cybersecurity.
Небольшие заголовки.
Okay.
Взломал Disney и украл.
A hacker hacked Disney and stole 1 terabyte of data
В общем, сотрудник Disney скачал,
because the Disney guy
по-моему,
downloaded some AI,
вспомнил.
AI software for picture generation.
Далее, мы вспоминаем
We should also remember the Bybit.
взлом. Это может быть,
They also had
я с вами здесь
a hack.
под атаку.
Well, this is not necessarily the supply chain attack, but that's okay anyway. And the third example is CrowdStrike.
Ситуация связана с программным
This is related to software when many
систем по всему
many systems globally started showing the blue screen, so they didn't work properly. Okay. The thing is that they abused trust. No, the supply chain attacks, you remember I talked about the levels of trust, so they abused trust. So the first example, your guy, a member of your staff who worked outside of the organization became the end target of the attackers in the supply chain attack. Okay, if we have the AI generator, well, this is a piece of software, this is a product which was compromised, and when they downloaded, so this is in a way a phishing attack. But this is a way how trust might be abused and how vulnerable we might be. The Bybit example, more or less the same thing. The colleagues didn't pay enough attention or time to verify the smart contract, where the funds will go. They kind of relied on this routine, normal, it used to be like that all the time, it worked yesterday approach. And the third example with the CrowdStrike. Well, some think that this is not a supply chain attack, but I tend to differ. But, well, this is an enemy from within. So your developer, your staff member, or the contractor's member who is a trusted person. So this guy makes a mistake. So when you verify the software, you should see it, but you didn't find it. So they have processes, they have tools for this verification, but, well, as ill luck would have it, they have some kind of internal trust to this tool. Okay, that's how it works, and so on. So, but this tool, for some reason, didn't identify the mistakes in the code, and this all ended up badly.
И я уже заканчиваю. Что делать? Это, если что, роман Чернышевского.
Okay.
Ну, попробуем в рамках названия
What shall we do?
предположить ряд действий.
This is also a novel by Mr. Chernyshevsky.
Но, тем не менее, определенные тезисы.
Okay, back to our matters. What shall we do? We should identify the unacceptable events, and we should focus on them. So if you don't know this, you don't take any steps. But if you call it an unexpected event, you are more likely to build a strategy. Use best practices. We're not talking about IT contractors or code-generating companies only, or those who have their own developers. The thing is that you as the end users, and by the way, this is crucial, you as the end user, you might come from the government, but using software, you should think about the requirements you put forward for your customer, for your contractors. Well, we have some monopolies, so no problem. If you don't buy it from us, we'll sell it to somebody else. It's not the way to do it. I mean, you should develop your dialogue with contractor regulator. So you should come to the regulator for some push. So if you hide the problem under the carpet, then there isn't any push from you, and the contractors are not going to spend money or time on this. And then we'll talk about asking others to adhere to best practices. Pay attention to the documents you are signing. The lawyers who are in charge of this, they're not necessarily cybersecurity experts. And on the other hand, when a cybersecurity guy drafts some agreement, they might be unaware of some legal nuances. So you should work together in synergy, and this way you will be secure because you set proper requirements for your contractors. Who will be ultimately responsible? Who will pay the money? We should remember this. And share the information. Just an example for you, what our colleagues in Verizon mentioned. They gather statistical data based on the information provided to them voluntarily. This way, we might build the overall picture and develop strategies, because strategies are built based on a set of some individual cases. And I think this is important. Colleagues, this is my call upon you. Please share information. This is really critical. That's it from me, colleagues. Thank you for attention. Thank you for going beyond my time slot. I hope you will focus on the software supply chain attacks. Thank you.
Что касается просто таких атак, когда маленькие компании.
Talking about attacks against small companies, I think AI and bots, they can do it well. You know, they just attack everyone and just hoping that this spray wide approach will give them some kind of output. So I understand that sometimes you use some sophisticated systems and so on and so forth, but now they have this helter-skelter approach. You just spray your attacks and you see what comes out of it. And if it really works, then you say that you are responsible, so on and so forth. But just the way you mentioned it, they're just spraying this widely. I mean, this malware or ransomware, and they just go throughout the partnership or client chain and so on. And I have another comment. Based on my experience of dealing with contracts, on one hand, I do agree with you. That's something we should kind of rely on.
О чем вы сказали, time to market.
But again, that's about time to market. Well, to agree upon the cybersecurity or InfoSec terms with the liabilities and with the evidence which could be used in court for the damage payment, well, this is difficult, and we need a security audit for both parties, and this takes time. Well, I'm not talking about some in-depth audit, any audit at all. Okay, so we should understand what they or we can use to prove this incident. Okay, the business and the lawyers supporting the business believe that this increases the time for reaching agreement, and then your time to market goes out of the window, because we need to sell as soon as possible to get our money as soon as we can. And so our info-security kind of approach works against the company, against the market, I would say. So we should understand the risks, we should determine what the unexpected events for us are, and we should come to terms with the business beforehand to determine a strategy, and so on. So without that, the right things you are talking about are quite difficult to implement. So these are my two brief comments. Thank you very much. Thank you. I also have a quick comment, if I may. I was ready for this, that you would mention that it's complex, but you know, big things start small, and we have the same approach here. I dealt with these contracts. I've spent enough time in cybersecurity to understand what I'm talking about. And And, well, I would say that it's enough to spend once a lot of time on this so that you are ready for some bad event in the future. You know, we get used to doing things in some context. Okay, it used to be like that, we have always done it like that, we've never been hacked, but hackers are just your imagination. So, talking about small and big companies. So, some companies believe that there are no hackers at all, those who have been attacked, where the IT guys are running good cybersecurity. So, but what matters is that you should take a pause, understand what can be done now. Okay, you can bring together a board of directors and tell them that here is the problem, to focus on this UEs, and you should tell them this will need time, this will take time. So, at any moment of time, take a pause, analyze things. Okay, you will spend some time, but you'll protect yourself in the future, in a way. In terms of motivation, okay, whom are we motivating? So what should we mention in the kind of communication field? So we should be reasonable. We shouldn't say that our security will protect us from any attack. People will try, but when you come here and when you say, well, colleagues, I'm concerned with some cybersecurity process in our system. How long have you been dealing with it? What are the problems you have? Maybe you'll just gather the opinion of the expert community and so on and so forth. So you kind of highlight the fact that you are dealing with it. You highlight the specific cases you want to discuss, and this generates trust. So if you have the info security policy, this is the high level of the iceberg. So the tip of the iceberg, but we still kind of show that we have it. We don't just pretend, we do. Okay, it will need to be verified, but just again, you remember my fire example. We start with reflexes, then we go to the level of some basic requirements, then we do it kind of mindfully, and then we take excessive measures. So we introduce some sensors, we ensure our flats, and so on and so forth. We are developing the cybersecurity comprehensive systems and so on and so forth. Well, I do agree with you, and I've been kind of anticipating this question. The question is over the microphone.
Вам необходимо четко прописать.
You've got to very quickly describe who's responsible for what. You will have to prove that the breach was due to the contractor, and who will be proved that? Do you have your own SOC, or do you have your SOC outsourced? The level of interaction with your contractor. If for a business needs, you let them inside your perimeter, so much so that they almost live there. It's similar to my example with a neighbor. So not just you live on the same floor, but you break the wall and then share your apartments now. So it depends on what you risk, and you've got to talk to the contractor and talk about the measures that they will have to take. If you don't include the damage amounts, then at least you want to describe the minimum requirements that they have to meet. There's the monopoly company that I talked about. It's quite adequate in the market. You wouldn't have the time to check on everyone. And do you know what you can do with that? Check on one. Do an audit of one company end to end. Understand their practice. Understand the pitfalls. And when you work with other contractors, you can tell them, okay, so-and-so, we have experience with that contractor. What do you have in this respect? And you won't be talking abstract. You won't be asking for an information security policy. You would be asking rather for specific documents. You would be asking for specific descriptions, and based on the responses you will be able to see whether that's a fix, whether that's the minimum required by the regulator, or do they really address it. And I was on the sending side and on the receiving side of supplier questionnaires, and I see how they respond, if they respond yes and no. If they only respond yes and no, I disregard this questionnaire and I don't consider the contractor. A contractor has to understand their degree of responsibility. And this is what we talk about when we meet. I, as a representative of cybersecurity, tell them that here's what we're concerned with, and this is our strategy, and this is driven by how we position ourselves in the market, by our maturity level, etc. And when contractors send me very minimal questionnaires, I just don't work with them. They just don't understand the context in which we operate. I hope I was able to answer the question. Yes, there are some details. I don't think I will be able to cover them now. Colleagues, if you don't have any more questions for me, I think I've really overused the time. Thank you very much for your attention.